That was quite a challenge to obviously select the best insight from that week because so much happened, and there's no way you can summarize so much learnings into um, basically 5 key highlights that I've selected today. But I'll try to, because some of the topics were surprisingly similar, from Google to Arrival to Babylon to design agencies. So I try to condense them by themes, and yes, hopefully you'll be able to get a peek of what we learned that week. What we're going to talk today is those 5 content piece of insights. So how measuring success and success in design helps you be a better designer. Why behavioral science is everywhere, and you may not be aware of it, but you may be using it on your project. Something that is quite discussed a lot in product strategy and product design is how to avoid the build trap. So very interesting insights from Digitas, Google, and Dext here. Considering end-to-end experience, so we had the luck to go and visit Arrival and kind of look at how they consider this, but also Babylon Health. So that's in it as well. And the simplest is not always the most efficient. So how do you actually design for complex use cases? So overall, I'm pretty happy of what we managed to cover this year, because I hope that it really reflected the diversity of how we do design, from small companies, small agencies to big giants, and also from designing for customer-facing applications, so the retail that everyone knows, but also designing for employees and the business-to-business world. One, understanding and measuring success makes you a better designer, and how you can embed that into your design process to elevate your products and decision-making. So this one, I think, is quite common, and Jen from Digitas basically shared something we probably all must have said at some point, which is sometimes we don't understand people. We say, hey, why don't they want us to do research? Oh, they just don't get design. And well, she had a very bold statement, which is, if we complain so much, maybe we are the problem, because we may be, and that's something she says is quite true to designers, be in this false belief that if we build something and we've built a good user experience, people will come. In reality, there's just so much that happens on projects. And basically, this is why she wanted to share her stories. So for example, before joining Digitas, she worked at this app, Flow app. And something she realized is, although they did a great job in design, they did a great job in terms of user experience, people just didn't want to pay for it. They were not willing to actually pay the value to be using this product. So most of them were just using the free plan, and the business is struggling to scale. And this is true that actually, when we think about this, we sometimes hear about the term market fit, but we don't really understand it. So she kind of shared this Eli's test that is used a lot in the VC world, which is basically, you can ask your user base, how would you feel if you could no longer use a product? And if at least 30% of the people are disappointed, then maybe you have a product market fit. And now when you think about product market fit, so first is hard to get, and this is why startups pivot so much. But even when you try to launch a new project on your product in a big organization, it's hard to find it. She's also talking about something called the product model fit, which is, there's many ways of designing a business, and you can so this was quite a cute illustration, I find. You can design for many people. On the far right of this graph, where basically everyone pays a little, but you design for the masses. And you also have the elephant, so where basically there's not a lot of people, customers, but they are premium customers, and you pay a lot, and they pay a lot for your product. And so basically, that was very interesting, because everyone agrees that Slack is great design, great UX. And for a while, I think everyone was kind of thinking that that Microsoft Teams was just a joke compared to Slack, and there's many design leaders who were tweeting about it. But when you look at what happened, and I suppose COVID was also responsible for this, you could see that in terms of users, well, I guess sorry for us, but Microsoft Teams is clearly winning the battle here. And as I work also in an enterprise environment, what she said is really true, is when we design, it really depends. Are we designing for the individuals? Are we designing for companies, enterprises? Because company enterprises, they also care about other things such as security, access of data, storage of data, GDPR, all these kind of things. And personally working as a bank, I really relate to that, because there's many tools we'd like to use, but we cannot, because we don't know if those tools gonna, I don't know, have some kind of security issues, and we cannot afford that in a secured environment. So that was it for Jane. Then we have Kieran from Dex, who works at a scale-up company. And for him, his notion of how we measure success is also very interesting, because when he got in charge of the design team, basically he wanted to really understand what was critical for the business to be able to drive some metrics about it. And those are the questions he actually asked his business partner. This is so interesting, because before doing anything design-wise, he really wanted to understand his environment and make sure that basically he has his goals aligned with the business. And to do this is how he explained his performance triangle. So you have impact, efficiency, predictability. So a quick focus on impact. So measuring success. So this is a variation of the Google Heart framework, which is basically he really wanted to understand how to measure business success and link that into his design work and the work of his team. And to come back on the previous axis as well, in terms of predictability and efficiency, what he decided to do is also track how much and how his team can work on the tickets. Are they able to budget efficiently the work they're going to do each week? And at the end of the week, have they done the work? And basically by doing this work iteratively, they are able to prove that the design has basically can demonstrate performance of their design. All right, and something very important that we discussed at the end of his workshop is the notion of efficiency, and acknowledging that there's a difference between measuring the performance of a team and a design team and the performance of the individual. So this is worth noting. All right, moving on. Behavioral science is everywhere, and you can embed it into your design process to make better products and make better decisions. So very interesting talk here, especially when you consider that the average user downloads this 0 app per month. I think I might be part of the average user, because yeah, I can't remember the last time I downloaded a new app, which is hard because obviously a lot of us are designing apps and we want people to come back and to embed basically habits into our products. And this is where using behavioral science can help. So they shared with us something that they consider a best-in-class example, which is this one. So this message, we received it in the UK when we had to get a COVID shot. And you can see here that, I guess I think the UK government is the highest, has the highest position in design in the UK. So they have a lot of people, and all this is very intentional. They didn't just write a message like that. So you can see how this is carefully crafted. So you have reached that commitment. You were so in the process, the top, that's great for your ego. You at the top of the queue. So there's other people behind you. So that's social proof. You are a priority. Who doesn't want to be a priority, especially in this world? It is free. Everyone loves free stuff, right? And then they also link the official website of the NHS, the health system in the UK, to have the argument of authority. And obviously there's a lot more to know here, but I'm just gonna highlight some of the findings and some of the techniques they shared with us, which is basically, if you want to design a behavior, it's kind of applying a design process to behavior. So instead of focusing on a use case or a feature, you focus on the behavior. And as you can see, it's kind of the same step: empathize, define, idea, so to kind of converge, expand, converge thing that can be applied in behavioral science. Also, if you want to get started, or if you're working there, you can rely on existing frameworks. So especially when we talk about manipulation ethics, something that was really interesting here, and I guess that's the value of being able to discuss with professionals in this field specifically, is to get their opinion on matters. Because all this, again, there's framework for that. And I think something that I found specifically interesting is Great was saying that when she sees some of the techniques that Booking.com use, I think most people will be familiar with Booking.com, but basically when you want to book a room, there's like 15 messages telling you how five of the people are looking at your website. There's only 2 rooms left. Hurry, hurry, hurry. And that's kind of like overdoing it. Where's the ethic there? And so she was saying how some of the practices she see on those websites could be more questionable in terms of ethics than, for example, when she worked for gambling website, because gambling website, they have regulation. They are operating in a regulated framework, and they want to make sure they don't violate this framework. So they wouldn't be able to do some of the stuff she sees in other, I would say, industries. So that was very interesting. And just to illustrate one, because there were many covered and we don't have so much time, but to illustrate one example of behavior. So they talked about nudge. So a nudge should be transparent, never misleading, always give the choice of people, and allow them to opt out. And obviously, when we want to nudge, same as obviously the government trying to nudge people getting the vaccine on time, the consensus is that behavior should improve the welfare of those being nudged. And the bad nudge is a sludge. It's when you violate one of those principles. And yeah, again, all this is theorized, they exist, and we can definitely reuse some of those frameworks to think about the behavior we push on our products. All right, the build trap. So I was really interested to see that this one was mentioned by so many companies, and I feel this is a collective trauma that we all have to face this. And maybe I'm going to first define what is the build trap. Is this. So you know how very often we say, yeah, we're going to build, be agile, we're going to measure and learn. Very often how we end up doing is just build, and build because, well, people like to build stuff. People don't like to revisit. We all have this bias thing. And yeah, so how do you kind of avoid this? So it's very interesting because Zivko from Google was kind of sharing his experience from his previous experience, working experience, where he tried many setups between agile and waterfall. And it's true that it's the first time I saw someone explain like that, because the reality is how big the diamond is. So for people who don't know, this model is basically the first diamond is like you diverge and then you converge on your project, and you have those 2 phases. And so the way he explained that in waterfall, basically you have time, you have months to do the study, and then you deliver. And then the problem is obviously there's a higher risk that you didn't get it right, but it's too late because you spent already so long to do the study. And then agile is when you have those smaller diamonds. But again, as the previous slide illustrated, the trap is sometimes we are so agile that we just build. And the way he explained the trap is actually very elegant. So the way he explained that is like when sunk costs are not presented as sunk cost, which is in agile, we think that we can make mistakes and we can fix them. But if the mistake is so big to fix that you're never going to fix it, then it's not agile anymore. You're just stuck with whatever you had initially. And as I previously said, people like working on new things, not necessarily changing things. It's funny because on that note, I heard different companies such as Google, Twitter, said that they have the fix it day or fix it week, which is basically in the product roadmap, they will allocate time to basically go through all the tickets and fixing existing things. But even I would say in the best in class companies, it's very hard to kind of be strict and really do those like fix it days or fix it weeks. So yeah, I felt like, yeah, okay, we all struggle with the same thing here. And yeah, and for Dex, it was kind of the same. It was interesting to see that Kieran's vision was he, before he arrived and took the lead of the team, everyone was working in agile, but really in a low maturity product maturity context, is basically everyone doing whatever, churning out stuff, churning out work, and because they did not have those mechanism or maybe those metrics and those vision, everyone was working very hard, but at the end of the day, there was not a lot of logic and sense in the products overall. And I suppose this is where he had this work on understanding what's the vision and the metrics. And the last thing, I think this one was actually from Digitas, Jen. So again, so many people talking about this trap, that even if you think you got something right, adding more features do not necessarily lead to more adoption. And when we're in this agile methodology, we kind of keep piling up and creating product debt as well. So is agile broken? My personal anecdote, it's interesting because when I started the design team at my company, Society General, everyone was talking about agile and the Spotify model. And it is actually now kind of known in the industry that even Spotify was not doing the Spotify model. So basically putting designers in squads. And we had this problem where we wanted designers to be able to have this overall view of the experience. And to do that, our business unit are already so siloed and so isolated that at that time, I was convinced that putting designers in those silos would just create more silos. All this to say that, especially combined with Agile, we really had to find a different way to make sure that we are able to design an experience at scale. I'll show you the graph proposed by Zivko from Google. At the end of the day, there's no right and wrong. It really depends on your structure and your project. And it was so nice to hear it because sometimes, I don't know if you spend too much time on social media like me, it really feels like you have the truth and people are very, very passionate about the truth. But going to so many companies and everyone struggling with the same things, I feel like that was very true. So that's his way of explaining it. So from his career, between Agile and Waterfall, it really depends on what's the final solution, your goal and your time. So I thought that was quite a nice way to explain this. And the way they try to make it work at Google, at least, so he works at Google Cloud, so the cloud tools for developer, is they try to be agile. So they will start with the developers, but still be able to do research and design. And we all know that to be able to do some deep research, you need more than just a week. So they try to plan that in parallel. So at the end of the day, the way he shared that is basically they try to run those dual track and kind of converge at the end. So I think this is very meta, so many diamonds converging. Last element to share from Kieran at Dex, because I said that the way that he approached this build problem was to actually mapping the future. So this is a really cool exercise. So not only he focused on what metrics values the business, he also went ahead and used a lot of active listening to understand what the business should look like, what the product team should look like, and then he was able to decide whether or not his team structure would support it. And I think that was kind of a big learning from the whole group, that you can actually do this kind of future mapping exercise for 3 months, for 6 months, just to have an idea. Again, as long as you have an idea where you want to go, and you can still adapt your plans, but it's good to have something in mind and a goal in mind to make it even clear for your team. All right, a different kind of insight here. We are more into, still product design, but maybe more into user research here. And that was quite really interesting because Arrival operates in a different space. So they're doing electric buses for cities and collectivities. And the way they are considering their product is basically the end-to-end experience. And they had a great way to explain it. And this is why I've selected that as a highlight. Again, the goal here is to enable people to view the big picture and kind of not get too stuck into the day-to-day operations and the day-to-day features. Arrival is making buses, electric buses. Most of the time, people will think when they think of a bus about the passengers, but actually, when they design a bus, they have to think about everyone else. And you see drivers, operators, software engineers, technicians, even other road users, they have to design thinking about everyone. So yeah, the way they're doing this is by doing this mapping exercise. So interesting. I'm currently trying to think how we can even reuse that at my company, where basically they will list everyone involved and they will map all the touch points in terms of the whole cycle. So not just using a product, it's from awareness to servicing, incident management. And you can see that it's just mapping the interaction. So you don't get drawn into the details of what exactly are the tasks. And if you look at this, there's a lot of people and passengers. Where are they? They are just here. So passengers, they're just a very, very small part of the journey. And very often, I think, especially when we don't have to go deep into products, and I feel sometimes I can see that also in conferences, we kind of focus on what people think they know the most. So maybe here, passengers for bus, but there's so much more, and design is so much more diverse than just designing for passengers. And this notion so this end-to-end experience was also covered by Babylon Health. And then I like that they added another layer of thinking that obviously when you have a health situation, your clinical evaluation will move through time. So you're not just one person with one condition at some time. It's all very dynamic and layered. And so they have to also design keeping this in mind. And obviously, again, when we talk about health, most people will think about end users, members, patients, and carers. But obviously, they have also to design for the clinical workforce and also the operations. So I like how as well here in this case, in terms of user research, they were focusing on how to do research and kind of protect the ethics of their data, but your team and your company as well. So all this was very interesting. And finally, the simplest design is not always the most efficient, and especially when designing for business professionals and employees. I feel like this is becoming my specialty in this case, because as you can see, design has to cover a wide diversity of use cases and to be truly inclusive, not just think about the main population, but think about diverse population. And this is very true in our practice of design at my company. So we are a bank and we deal in the corporate and investment banking side. So very complex topic, very advanced topics. And I found out with time that as designers, sometimes we are biased as well. We think that we are the users. And we made that mistake in the past where we oversimplified because we thought that, that tool was where there was too much on the tool, too much data, too many actions, too many buttons. And so we did something that I think every designer is taught at school, where we actually introduce a lot of white space, a lot of progressive disclosures where everything is done by step. And people hated it. And when I reflect on why people hated it, because first we'll be like, don't they know, or maybe we know better that is good design and you shouldn't be using your old tool. But it took me some time to realize that I hated it because as professionals, they are used at to a certain mental model, and we were not adapted to their mental model. It's a kind of And it's a joke I've made, and actually I think I tweeted about it. It's a bit like if I was using Figma and oversimplifying, and when you want to change a character, you suddenly have a 5-step form to ask you if you're really sure you want to change the size of the text or like the line height, all these kind of things. You wouldn't like that as a designer. So why are we doing that to all other professional users? And I like how a lot of time people say, yeah, do like Apple, do like Google. But even Apple and Google, what does it even mean? Because at Google, they have simple interface. But if you look at Google Ad, it's very gray, it's tables, it's not what people think. And in this example, especially, you have an example of a simple interface in terms of health. But obviously, healthcare professional, they don't need that. They have something more complex, which is another example here, full of acronyms, a lot of things going on. And again, you can't say that one is better than the other because it really depends about for who we are designing for. And this is one, I shared actually 2 projects with the group. So this is actually a simplified interface. The 2 projects actually cover the same use cases, but for different types of users. So in this one, it's an interface we give to French small and medium enterprises to manage their foreign exchange. So you can see here, they can convert US dollar against euro. And now I'm going to show you the exact same use case, but for very advanced professionals. So that would be given to traders or treasurers from big corporations. So people who can really trade advanced and have very advanced financial needs. And that would look something like this. And you can see here, there's a lot going on. Products are much more complex. And again, you can't say that one is better than the other. And I think this is a very different way of thinking, especially if everyone is working with people who are very engineering mindset, where they would think there's one absolute best solution. While user experience is not mathematics, there's not one best solution. It really depends about who you're designing for. So really, the way we can think about it and the way I try to explain it in terms of framework is there's really a difference between the interface expertise and the business expertise. So every combination, so let's say here is overcomplicated. Basically, you made the interface too busy for the needs of the business. But what's really dangerous is here, and this is what we've done to our traders when I was telling the fail story that we had at the beginning of our journey, where we oversimplified, or you could think of an oversimplified Figma, really, where you will make it so easy that you take away the agency and the control for people, and in that case your design can turn into a black box. So this is where it's a bit dangerous in terms of design. So always make sure that your design fit, and obviously you can do that through user research, but that they fit the need of the users.
So much, Morgan. I felt like there were so many insights that just need to be like unpacked for weeks. I felt like my head is buzzing with all the information, and it would be great to hear from the community. We actually have some people who were on the program as well, so they might have some extra insights. I could hear, and probably a few others who've seen it and heard it. Maybe you guys also have reflections. But while we are waiting for more questions to come in, there are lots of you who submitted questions through the type form, and I would love to start the conversation with a few that I feel like are especially important in the UX community at the moment. I'll start with a very broad one about UX maturity and how can we improve UX maturity within a company. I feel like that's something that has been in conversation for a long time. So Morgane, you work in a huge organization yourself. How can you improve UX maturity, especially in a huge company?
I wish there was like one magic formula. And if I guess there was one magic formula, everyone would be super mature. But I feel like it's, there's 2 strategies when you scale, right? Because UX maturity is basically how do you improve the UX understanding at scale. It's either you hire more designers and they will try to work on projects, or you try to make people buy into your work and work with you. And if you want people to help, I mean, again, you can try by brute forcing yourself in. So more, but then maybe, that will create difficult situations where not everyone is thinking and talking the same language. If you really want to have buy-in for people, you can't avoid from basically spending time with them, explaining basically all the soft skills that, when at school you don't really care about it. You're like more about, I want to use Figma, I want to be learning how to code. But I found out that especially over the years, being able to really understand people's point of view and talk with them is the best way to get their buy-in. And where it is sometimes difficult, I've seen, is when we're like the cool designers, we're all designer glasses, and we come in was like, let me evangelize you. I've understand everything about life, but not you. You're so wrong. I'm gonna teach you life. How do you want someone to receive positively your message? I mean, if someone was doing that to you, would you listen to them? And it's funny because designers sometimes we're so much in our bubble that we expect everyone to understand our job. But the thing is, we have to, and I think that's part of our job to. I don't like evangelization. Educate could be a thing. But when you think about it, even when we work with other people, we also have to understand how they work and their priorities. So it's kind of, yeah, again, leveraging on soft skills, really understanding, spending time with your stakeholders, and a bit, what Kieran did when he put design at the core of Dex, spending time with them, understanding what matters for them, and yeah, being able to articulate values out of it. Sorry, that was a long question, a long answer, but I have a lot of thoughts about it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you that sometimes as a design community, we want to be so reserved and kind of feel like we do have the special powers that no one else can understand and touch. And it's only understandable because that's what makes us special, and that's why we have jobs, because we have some skills and we have some superpowers that can make things happen. But I feel like in that pursuit, we sometimes forget that we also need to include people in a wider organization. If we want everyone to value design, if we want everyone to understand what we do, we should have those conversations, and we should be much more inviting and much more friendly with other departments than kind of try to be reserved. I love the example that you shared, the story how you saw IT security. I feel like it's kind of a very similar situation when we think that design, like everyone understands what design is. Do you want to share your security story?
I was actually thinking, should I share that? Because it's already a long answer, but I think it's a funny one at my expense, so I'll share it. So you know how sometimes designers were upset when people are like, oh, you're just the person who adds some colors, or you're just the one who paints the screen, right? Um, well, one day at work, because we're sitting next to the cybersecurity team, I was chatting with the head of cybersecurity, and I don't know why. Again, I was like, Morgan, you spoke too fast again. I wanted to be nice and cool, so I said something like, "Oh, so you're the person who validates a security exception? When I want to go to some specific, like on Google Drive and need a security exception." He did not like it because he's the head of cybersecurity. Obviously, in today's context, we all know what cybersecurity is and how crucial it is not to be, well, victim of a ransomware and not victim of basically any cyber threat. It's so, so critical for businesses. But in my mind, I wanted to be nice to him. And so I did that. And at the moment I said that, I was like, oh my God. It's like when my friend, they don't know what design is. And they say, oh, so you're a designer? So you're the one who sends this, did we solve your issue? Did we solve the ticket? And you asked them to rate on a scale of 1 to 5. Did you solve your ticket successfully? And yeah, so all this to say that you can't be upset that people don't understand your work because you don't understand everyone's work. And like me, you may be having some mental shortcuts on what people do, or even like when we sometimes love to joke, like, what do product owners even do? What do developers do? Well, we don't know everything that they do, and people don't know everything that we do, and that is just how life is. Nobody does everything on earth. But yeah, that was a story at
That's
my
a great
expense.
story, and I think it kind of goes back to what you mentioned about the soft skills and power skills. And I think there was a big discussion throughout the program as well around how to progress in your UX career. And the number one advice is when you reach a certain point, it stops being about your direct UX skills or research skills or any other product design skills or design skills in
Yeah.
general. it suddenly becomes more about the soft skills, and the empathy is number one, but also other things that you need to know how to facilitate meetings, how to work with conflict resolution, and all these other things that makes you a valuable asset of any team, and especially as a design team or in an organization. So definitely an important conversation. Related to the question of maturity, how do you scale UX and not lose yourself? I love this answer that has been submitted. I think especially not losing your soul while scaling UX. I can relate to that.
Oh my God. How to answer such a wide question? I mean, I'm trying to actually do a keynote next week on this very topic. And even in 30 minutes, I won't be able to cover it. So, hmm, one thing I'll say, scaling UX obviously relies on soft skills, because if you want to scale how people work and how projects are done, you need to convince that this is the right way to do. So obviously you can work on metrics, but that means you also need to have active listening to actually listen to what people care about, to be able to articulate the value of design based on what they care about. But I would say there's no magic formula, and again, one of the key message of my presentation is to be aware of so-called rules and mantras, because again, especially in the world of social media, you feel that some people are very vocal about something, and you feel, oh, that's what we should do. But again, depending on your context, depending on your environment, maybe it's not the right way to do for you, and that's why sometimes I see people being a bit too how to say that, passionate about something, and trying to sell their model everywhere. And I can understand, like you have a book to write, you have conference to give, but the whole point of going to this kind of conferences and attending the UX and product design week is to see different setup and how people answer those challenges differently, to inform yourself so you can make an informed decision and not just try to apply some random formulas you've seen elsewhere. I don't think I mean, we've mentioned that quite a lot. Kieran mentioned that. It's been discussed also by Zivko at Google. So yeah, sadly, there's no magic formula. So all you can do is learn as much as you can from other setups, see if that would work for you. And maybe, hey, if it doesn't work for you, you don't have to force yourself in doing it.
I totally agree with you about not following some sort of one approach that you read somewhere or someone spoke at a conference. As you rightly said, even Spotify doesn't use Spotify model. So it is really, really important to double check, does it work for my product and my team and my size and my scale of the company, and how much time we have and how much investment we have. And we actually have a question related to that. There is the team size. Do you think there is an ideal team size for a UX team or for a product team from your experience? And how big is your team at the moment?
That's also a topic I'll talk about next week. Because when people think about scale, one of the magic formula when you think about scale is just to hire more people. You do one project with one designer, you want to do 100 projects, hire 100 designers. But the thing is, 100 designers, in terms of communication, I think in anyone who worked, I guess even in a group project, like when you work with one person, it's okay. Suddenly you try to do a group project with 5 people, it's chaos. Can you imagine 100 designers unorganized? So then you have to hire 20 designers to do design ops and organize them. So again, this can work, and there's definitely structure where it works, but it's not the only way. And to give you an example, and again, it's based on our context. The way we decided to scale is to keep the design team super lean and super engaged. So we share basically the best practices across the organization. So the communication is super straight because it's me and 20 designers. And we've completely shifted how we work on projects, which means there's some part of the design process we basically coach people to do. And obviously, as we are responsible for the quality, we could say, hey, this is not a good persona. But considering that we're in very complex topics, we rather explain to people how to do a good persona than trying to do it ourselves, because sometimes the topics, like for the just giving one example, who are the people involved when they want to finance a bridge or finance some kind of infrastructure organization? As designers, we don't know. People from the business, they know. So for us, it's more, I guess, it's smarter to train them to produce the design deliverables with us, so we kind of open up our design process rather than trying to shadow them and produce those design artifacts ourselves. And same goes with the dev, but I think I'm spending too much time. So yeah, just saying that scaling doesn't imply more people, because there's a cost. And I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. And more people mean more needs for coordination. And if you're in an environment where it's already very siloed and very hard to organize, that might not be the best. You may be better off with one central team. That's the setup we still decided. Maybe we'll change at some point, but that's what's been working for us.
Thank you for answering that. And we have also lots of questions on the future of UX, because again, there is a name future in our name. So it's only makes sense to talk a little bit about the future and VRs and AI and everything else. So I'll start with a question around AI and how do you see, I think especially with all these incredible advances in AI, where literally we can generate anything now, any imagery within like 5 seconds. Do you think there is any sort of influence on how AI will change the job of a UX designer or UX as an industry?
Because we work a lot with our data scientists, and it's interesting discussing with them, because even them sometimes are like, why is everyone so obsessed with AI? Because today AI is data, is big data. It's not like a sentient machine that, I mean, we're far away from that. Maybe one day we'll reach that. But today, when we talk about AI, especially when you see all like the DAL-E or like stable diffusion, and the other one I can't remember from the right now. But when you see those models, it's big data. So it's basically, especially if you see some YouTubers, I've been watching it. It's very interesting how they work now with those models, where they can generate basic concept arts. But it's based on the fact that there's so much already that we've made, so much like concept arts and so much styles already, that you can now leverage on this kind of collective intelligence to do your work. And I feel, especially in our industry, not just UX, but in design in general, whether it's like web design or design for movies, for example, today productions are at such a scale compared to how we used to do things in the past, that we need to have better tool to work with that. And if with big data, AI, we are able to kind of go faster on some of the concept arts. Yes, it's the same as, people using Figma, that is better than how we used to design back in the days interface in Photoshop. Figma comes with pre-made features for the web. Well, stable diffusion and all the other tools can be used indeed to generate ideas, but again, it's based on the fact that those things have been made already. And I guess the biggest question here is, I still feel there's a bit of identity crisis between designers, because on one hand, you think you're so unique and your art, and it's amazing, and you're unique. And the other hand, you have like the real design world, which is making things that people use. And at some point, when you scale, you have to accept that what you do is industrialized. That is not one solo thing, because to give you a real example, in my company, we have trade blotters. Who wants to I mean, we've done so many trade blotters that we have a pattern for that. It's industrialized. I don't want someone creative to rethink the whole experience of trade blotter at every project. And our users, they don't want to have a different experience from one service to the other. They want consistency. And as all this to say that, yes, you can, the same way that, you can curate those algorithm, and you can basically compose based on, your intent. Same for design. You can decide you want to really do this kind of very brand new experience, see how that would be. But if it's a use case that's been seen already, then people want to be familiar with how things behave on the internet. There's no need to kind of reinvent the wheel somehow.
Right, so automation is the future. Hopefully the boring things will be automated and the exciting things will still be left for designers. But I think you're absolutely right about the scale of things, and our job requires us to think at a scale, and I think it's important for us to have the balance between creativity and operationalizing the actual design.
Maybe to
Related to
come
the
back, actually, it's kind of a similar topic, but there was a lot of worry in the design industry when we started to use more and more design systems. So design systems, I'm sure everyone knows, but basically it's instead of redesigning and recoding a button every time, now we have a kit of buttons, cards, steppers, the classic elements you need on a website. And I remember when design system became more and more used in the industry, people were like, oh, but what will I do as a UI designer? Because before, a UX designer would do a low fidelity prototype, and a UI designer would then put that into some kind of shape. But now with design systems, you can go faster. So people were worried about this. But then I could say, before we didn't have computers, so we had to do things. I mean, not my generation, maybe generation of our teachers, they had to do prototyping on paper. So can you imagine if you want to change something, you just redo everything. Maybe they think that was better. I don't know. But yeah, I would say tools change. There's a saying that I think before 30, everything is exciting because it's new and you can probably have your career in it, and people are usually friendly. And after 30, that's where, that's the thing that came after you were a teenager and willing to discover a thing. And that's where you start to think that, to feel that things are against nature and it shouldn't be like that. So I was listening to this from a podcast, I can't really remember, but it really struck me because then I was like, ooh, am I feeling against those things because no, I'm not part of the cool kids anymore? So yeah, food for thoughts.
Great. We actually got a bit more context on the question, which I love, from Francisco. He's saying, my question is, the AI is because I do imagine a future where websites and apps will adapt in real time to each visitor. All data processing power will allow for unique UX tailored for the individual user. Any thoughts on that, Morgan?
But I felt it's kind of the same as, adapt, yes, but maybe that means we will not produce screen designs, but maybe we'll produce rules. It's kind of when you think about people who talk about voice design, they don't design screens, pixels, they design voice recognition, and they help with the kind of natural language. That's actually a really interesting take because they're still working on experience and UX, but not with pixels. So yeah, maybe there will be a future where we don't touch pixels and push pixel anymore. But again, I would say in terms of the intent, again, everything you see today and all the people doing, experiments with those AI algorithm, they still have to refine based on their taste and what they want. And I encourage everyone, because obviously most of them are not accessible except Stable Diffusion. I think it's this one you can download, but it's like 7 giga. But if you're too lazy like me or too busy, you can just watch YouTube, people who actually work on this. It's very interesting to see how the design process, there's still a design process. They curate what the algo is generating. So it's not just magically this sentient that is creating that thing. There's still like an intent and someone who is curating what good looks like, I'd say.
Love it. And I think it's such an important conversation. User experiences and all about intent. And yeah, we can talk about pixels as much as we want, but things evolve, interfaces evolve, and our role will evolve into designing, just creating the experience of something that might not look like a screen at all. But we still will need the same skills of empathy and understanding the problems and how we can navigate people to solve them. So that is great. Next question, also in the future, is about mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality. So given the new wave of all these technologies, how do you see the UX process adapting for these changes?
With mixed reality?
And augmented reality. I suppose we can throw metaverse in there as well. but in terms of how the role of the UX designer is changing with, yeah, the space has been different and not flat anymore.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll see. That kind of make me think that what was interesting at Arrival is to see the design process. So basically, they kind of have the same classic design process you would expect on a digital product, except that they're designing buses, the experience of buses. So they have to actually also do some physical design, and they use 3D printers to print their prototypes. So the design process is kind of similar. They do research, they iterate, they document. Documentation is super important. But they, in the meantime, instead of pushing pixel, they use 3D printers. So I've kind of feel like the core job is the same. Like you still do research, but maybe in terms of tool, you won't be using Figma, but maybe using like Unity or any kind of 3D tools. Um, but that is, I would say, again, it doesn't change the fundamental nature of basically making sure that whatever we design, whether it's a website, whether it's a bus, electric bus, whether it's in the metaverse, fit people's needs. So this research element is the same. And I'm pretty sure at this point we still need developers. So the handoff with developer and all the soft skills and talking with projects are still the same. So this invest in your soft skills, people. I mean, soft skills, they're always there. And yeah, in terms of hard skill, I mean, even if you consider digital product, we went from Photoshop, Illustrator to Figma today, and who knows what tools we'll use next. So yeah.
Yeah, I think goes back to being human. We always humans will figure out what our job is. Our human skills still will be needed in the future. Just the job might evolve slightly. Talking about evolution, we have some few questions about getting to leadership positions and growing as a UX designer. What are the most important things a UX designer must do today to grow and develop?
So Rochelle talked about power skill during the UX and product design week. So it's not in there because I had to be harsh and just keep some bits. So if not, I would probably have this a 24 hours recap, and I'm not sure people will survive that. But Rochelle talked about power skill, and it's kind of a rebranding of soft skill because soft skills, I mean, the naming is a bit, yeah, it's a bit odd because at some point in your career, when you become senior, so that's what Rochelle was sharing with the group, at some point in your career, when you become senior, people expect you to know how to do your job. So whether if you're a dev, they expect you to know some of the dev, the languages. If you're a designer, they expect, and I mean, when I hire people, I expect them to know how to run an interview, how to run usability testing, how to use a design tool, right? And if you want to go to the next level, you have to be able to influence and have a wider impact than just you working solo. So that could be becoming a leader of sorts, so not necessarily managing people, but being able to influence people. So, for example, I have people in my team who have really a huge impact in design quality because they are showing examples of what goods looks like. Um, you could also become a manager and try to scale an operation, for example. And a lot of time when you are into those spaces, it's not that you know how to design in Figma that is going to help, is how, basically everything we discussed so far, active listening, power skills. So this is why soft skills is not such a great term for that. Power skill is better, being able to have those conversations. And all this, sadly, I mean, I really feel it when I was at school, like nobody cared about soft skills, power skills. But at some point, if you want to be able to do things at scale with other people, you have to learn how to be able to work with them. And if you are kind of stuck into your expert mentality, like every job, you have people who are very good at one thing, but again, in a society and in an organization, it's a society of people, we need to be able to work together. And those connectors usually are the ones that are needed. And this is why I know there's a big discussion and controversy sometimes about, should leaders be still able to do their craft? So if you're a design manager, do you still need to be able to use Figma? If you're like a dev manager, do you still need to code? Um, I actually wonder if the people who ask those questions are junior, because obviously when you're junior, you just know you don't know that what you don't know. So you just know about, doing your craft, working on project, grinding. Um, but I feel like if you are very high up and you realize that actually maybe it's able to explain design to stakeholders, maybe arrange different situation, adapt. That's all the skills that you probably need if you want to move up from senior to leader or senior to VP. So power skills.
Definitely, going back to one of the insights that you shared about understanding business context, I think that's another thing that the more you move to the leadership position, the more conversations you will have with people from the business side, with investors, with CFOs. If you want to hire more designers, you have to explain how this is going to help the business and make more money. If you're going to spend money, you better explain how you're going to make more money. So I think the more you get to those positions, the more you need to understand anything from financial language to the business context to the metrics to operations and just general management. And that's probably the hardest suddenly to dive into completely new world of things that you need to learn. But I think, yeah, we all get to the point when we realize, okay, now's the time to learn all of that.
Yeah. And again, if you have strong power skills, you'll be able to see that you need to improve in those areas. It's very true what you say, because actually I'm thinking at work, we have this program, leadership and management program, that is open to basically all the workforce. So people could join, they could be like in operations, they could be in sales before, they could be in development. So it's based for everyone. But what people learn in this program is actually how to come up with a project proposal, how to explain the strengths, opportunities, threats, and weaknesses of your proposition or your current situation, why you want to do this project, what we should be doing it, what are the values, the budget, and the timeline, and all this. And yeah, it's true that, yeah, it's a different set of skills.
Definitely. And I've heard it actually from quite a few companies now that it's becoming a common thing to educate designers when they want to do a redesign or any sort of design decision. How do they pitch it to the rest of the organization, to the leadership team? I mean, the famous case is obviously the Amazon deck and Amazon proposal when you need to like outline the case and all of that. But there are many versions of that in every company where you basically need to make a business case for your design, even if it's a small thing, especially if it's a huge thing. At the end of the day, it does have a big value. If you want to create a design system, it will save time and money. If you want to hire more designers, maybe that will increase revenue because you will be able to create better products. So everything has a reason. You just need to be able to explain it to the rest of the organization.
Yeah, and I feel yeah, honestly, I mean, those things somehow they are maybe taught at school, but not in that format, and it's a bit of a shame, because what I've seen often is people kind of grinding and not raising red flags enough because they want to prove that they're good at their work, so they'll just do everything until like it's too much, and or until like they're overwhelmed by the volume of work. And I guess that's the story of every design team that is stretched. And being able to foresee this, think about future planning, the exercise I shared earlier, being able to articulate why we must avoid this situation. Yeah, that's part of the skill we must learn when you want to move stuff at scale or even move into leadership.
We have time for a few more last questions. So if anyone on this session has any particular question, please feel free to type it in the chat and we'll try to squeeze as many as possible. In the meantime, I'll try to pick as many as possible from the pre-submitted questions. And actually there was one related to what we just mentioned about the revenue and the business side. So what are the biggest challenges in reaching revenue goals while keeping users happy? So where is this balance between good UX versus revenue? So how do you think about that in your company?
So is there a generic answer to that? Because I feel like it depends so much in the industry you're in. To give you an example, we were discussing this today with the team actually. in the project that we work on, because we're in the B2B space, very often we are working on tools that must be more efficient, better with better usability. And we actually don't really care about retention and how much time people spend. I mean, we're kind of the opposite of social media, if you want. Because let's say, from the example I shared, if you're a treasurer and you want to, I don't know, you know that you're going to receive a big volume of US dollar because you have a payment from your provider in dollar, but you operate in pound or euro. You want to protect your revenue. There's a financial service for that. So maybe they will connect to our service and do this this transaction. We're not going to say, hey, stay more on the platform and we'll give you a 20% discount. I mean, that's not how business to business or wholesale volume works. Or even sometimes our mission is maybe to decrease how much time and operations people do. So for example, I can think of a project where before our project, people would spend 3 hours doing something, collecting data and everything. And after we build a tool for them and they could finish their task in 30 minutes. So the goal here is actually to decrease how much time you spend on projects. This is why asking what people values is so important, because you may have some preconceived ideas that you have from social media, and it's not what your industry or what your project values. So sometimes asking the question could be nice. I definitely did that when I remember, but that was years ago. I went to my boss and asked him 5 questions about what's our mission, what's our priorities, what should we value. I mean, I can't remember exactly all the questions I asked, but just to make sure that I was in sync with him. And maybe you can disagree, but actually you can have this conversation once you know actually what the other person thinks and not what you project upon them.
I wish there was one answer, isn't it, for those tough questions that could just magically solve everyone's problem, and that could be the cure to balance it all. We have one question about the balance and the link between UX and another field, which is linking UX with brand. And I think that's another interesting field where, again, communities are quite separate. There is a very huge brand community and branding that incredible at what they do, and again, create brands that look wonderful. And then there is a very huge UX community who create great products. And suddenly when they clash together, it's very difficult to implement brands in UX. And there are very, very few companies and agencies that specialize on creating branded user experiences that feel organic. So how do you think about brands within UX? And I suppose, how would you approach balancing brand and UX?
That's a tough question indeed, because this is actually a good example of sometimes goals to be different. Because when you work in branding, obviously you want to make your brand unique and recognizable. And when you work in UX, you want to make your product usable and accessible. Actually, there was a really good talk, I forgot, from I think Klarna at Config this year, where basically about typography, how basically Klarna had their own typography for their brand. And they realized that when they started to have international languages, it was getting very difficult to keep a typography that would be accessible and not super heavy. So they had to actually design a compromise, which is using the system's typography and still able to be able to convey Klarna's brand, but adapt so that the products they do are still accessible. I mean, are good in terms of accessibility and international languages. So I feel like it's a classical thing where if you design in a vacuum and everyone is separated, then you meet once a year and that's going to be a clash. Whereas especially if you have a branding team that is separate, for example, we have a branding team that is separated. And when we work on stuff, we keep them in the loop. So for example, when we work on accessibility and typography and colors, there's the brand, they love their color. And we're like, yeah, but on the web, their colors are great on paper. On the web, it doesn't pass the accessibility criteria. What do we do? And we can come up with a solution together. And it's quite interesting because once you work with them, with your power skill, next time someone actually asks a question, they redirect to you. And that's actually what happened with us. So again, it's everyone has different specialties and you cannot expect everyone to be like you. Otherwise, I mean, the world will be only designers, and maybe I think that would be boring. So you have to accept that other people have other priorities. And it's a bit like when we work on Medium. So we have a team, and the team can write articles. We always like to engage a team so that they are aware of what we do. And it's just a matter of telling them, hey, we're going to publish this. Do you want to read it? Even for them, it's interesting to know what we're doing. And for us, and I feel that's a real feedback that I got. Sometimes as designers, we are not aware that we may be saying things with a very specific mindset. And the team's role is to make our article understandable by even people outside our organization. So they kind of try, kind of getting us out of like, or like, very close mindset as designers and making something that can be understood by more people. So yeah.
It's a brilliant answer. And I feel like, because you mentioned a few things about the limitation of technology and accessibility, and I feel like it's almost we are going through the same cycle as in general with web design when it just appeared, when graphic design was so cool and shiny and you could do anything, and then look at the web where everything is pixelated and you can barely use the font, and kind of it can look okay-ish, but we wish it could look like printed stuff. And now we're fully can design anything on the screen that looks even better than anything printed. But I agree the accessibility issues and other things are still limitation, and the speed, funny enough, still is there. So we can't potentially do all the things that we want to do. But I feel like that limitation probably will be over at some point. And then I think brands can definitely flourish and have even more seamless experience that definitely won't clash with the intent that UX teams put into products.
Yeah.
And
I guess like a very classic example that I've seen again and again is you want to design something amazing as a marketing website, maybe use heavy RAM, very demanding on the brother, but then you also want your website to be light enough to be accessible by everyone in the world. So at some point you have to reach a compromise. Otherwise, you're going to open the browser, it's just going to explode, if you don't have a laptop that is powerful enough. So yeah.
We have time. I'll finish on the last question because I feel like it's probably late for a lot of you wonderful people around the world. For some of you might be actually super early, depending on which times you're in. But would love to wrap up on a bit of a future focused question. So I think in general, what do you think are the biggest challenges the UX community faces right now? And maybe as a community, we should think about and maybe solve, or at least start thinking about anything particular that stands out for you.
I guess that's the reason why I selected those highlights. Are kind of aligned with what I can see being discussed in this industry. So obviously understanding business, being able not just to produce but to influence and work with people as same level and not just being executing tasks. So, and to do that, well, you have to understand what business value metrics. I'm not gonna redo my insights. Same with like understanding behavioral things, because again, I feel everyone is using it. I mean, let's be honest, when you present your work and let's say you have two options, you will try to nudge your project to choose the one you prefer the most. I've seen this being done. So you're doing it, maybe you're not giving it a name, but be kind of being aware of that. And maybe sometimes we don't know, but we're nudging people in a bad way. So that's going to be sludge. So being aware of this framework, and that's kind of linked to ethical design, is super, super important. Yeah, and so the end-to-end journey, okay, I feel I'm like going around my insights. So important because again, especially, I mean, it's not I'm obsessed with this idea, but I feel like the social media is like a bubble and it's always the same things that are being represented. Always the same kind of projects, the kind of, you can think of all the Behance projects, and they, do not reflect the diversity of design and the complexity of design. So taking a bit of time to kind of go beyond what you just see on TikTok and Instagram, kind of reading the kind of in-depth studies or learning from like long case studies, just to go past, the 5 top tips you see on Instagram, because I really see the difference between people who've kind of been educated the former way and people who have mainly consumed a lot of social media. And I have to say, yeah, it's obviously the content that will be trending, but the content that are trending and not necessarily what you need on your project and what is going to be useful.
Love it. This is the best way to finish our session today. Just recapping all the important information we shared. And definitely, I totally agree with you. This is something that worth thinking about and worth diving deeper in. Thanks everyone for joining today. And for those of you who are interested in more innovation and frameworks for innovation, we have another session next week. So you can definitely join us to hear all about the innovation insights that we gathered again from the top companies in London this summer. And after that, we have one more on branding. So lots to share, lots to learn. But thanks everyone for staying till the end. And thank you, Morgane, for sharing your wonderful insight. This was amazing and such a pleasure to host. Yes, thanks everyone for this time. And until next week.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye.